Karen Leibowitz and her husband co-founded two beloved Bay Area restaurants, Mission Chinese and more recently, The Perennial. Karen was really troubled by all the sexual harassment scandals in the news, so she decided to figure out how to prevent it from happening in the first place. She has a few ideas, and one has to do with how to protect her servers from creepy customers.
At our restaurants, we have a system where if a customer is inappropriate with a server, then that server just kind of taps out and a different server takes over that table, usually our biggest, scariest looking guy.
That tactic resembles one taken by a chef over in Oakland. Tara Duggan of the San Francisco Chronicle told us more about that.
So I've been working on a story that has been much more uplifting than the other stories about harassment, which is a restaurant also in Oakland. It's actually very close to Pizzaiolo it's called Homeroom. They actually only really serve macaroni and cheese of many different kinds. And they also have they have 100 employees because it's a super popular restaurant. They have a to-go and catering business too. It's owned by a woman named Erin Wade. She used to be an employment lawyer, so she's really excited about teaching her staff about harassment. She promotes women to management positions, so she thought she was doing everything right. And then she found out some of her staff were having a real problem with harassment by customers. And at first I was surprised because I thought it's like a mac and cheese restaurant. It's not a bar, you don't think of. But there were some problems, and they came up with this really interesting system where they basically leave it up to the server to decide if they're feeling uncomfortable. But with a customer, they have a color-coded system where the server just has to say yellow, orange, or red to their manager. They don't have to explain what happened because everybody's different, right? Like for some people, if they just get a bad vibe from someone or maybe someone's staring at them and they just don't feel comfortable around that person, they can say yellow, and then they can choose to not serve that table anymore, or they could just ask the manager to keep an eye on that table for them. If it's a worse situation, for example, if someone's kind of coming on to you a little bit or making all these compliments and trying to get into your space, it's orange, and then the manager automatically takes over your table so you don't have to deal with that person. And if it's a really bad situation, it's red, and they get kicked out of the restaurant.
And Karen has a few ideas about how to discourage bad behavior in the kitchen. Here's Kira and Karen again.
You suggested a few months back that restaurants might hang up a poster basically about how not to sexually harass your coworkers, like the same idea as those posters about how to save someone who's choking. Have you drafted that poster yet?
I have. I've drafted the language, and I've been working with a designer, and I am currently waiting for a lawyer to review it and make sure that the advice given is correct and wise. But the way that I started thinking about it was really that so many of the stories that we hear in the restaurant industry are of people feeling powerless, particularly when management does not respond to their concerns. And I thought, well, there are resources, and people need to be connected with those resources. So it really literally says like what to do in case of sexual harassment. And it's like, these are the steps that you can take. And it's a message to anyone who sees the poster that they have allies and some pointers for how to reach them.
You have not hung your poster yet at your restaurant because you're still having it reviewed by lawyers. And one of the things that you mentioned about doing there is having, if somebody feels harassed by a customer, then they tap out. What are some other things that you do there that you think might be replicable at other restaurants?
Well, at our restaurant, we have those kinds of affirmative declarations of our values within the staff community. So not speaking to the customer with a sign, but, we have meetings where I'll gather the whole kitchen and say, as you know, there have been a lot of stories of restaurants with very bad behavior. And I want you to know that if you ever experience something like that or witness something like that, I want to know. I want you to tell me so that we can deal with it. Don't think that I'm going to sweep it under the rug, because I want to have a kitchen culture that's good for everyone. And then our chef, Michael Andreatta, said, yeah, and if you're doing it, like, I will like kick you out that day. Like, don't ever do it. So like my orientation was to speak to people who have suffered sexual harassment and say, like, I'm here for you. And his was to say to people who could be doing it, like, quit it. Don't do that. So we kind of came at it from both sides. And then, I also noticed in some of the news reports about, for example, Four Barrel, the coffee roaster in San Francisco, that a lot of bad behavior circulated around staff parties. And so, or that those were kind of occasions for bad behavior. And so in advance of our holiday party, which we had in January, because we're in the restaurant industry, I, wrote the invitation and said, like, let's all have fun and not touch each other inappropriately. Just, I kind of wanted to keep it light, but also to say, like, these are the moments that you want to really be your best self, set your intention to not be a sexual harasser as we go into the holiday party. Right. And then we had a great time, and I don't think anything bad happened, The other thing going on in our restaurant is that we have a pretty even split between male and female managers. So I think we have made it clear that you can talk to any of us. And if there's a problem, if you feel more comfortable with this type of manager or that type of manager, and that we all are responsive. I also had to fire someone for sexual harassment about 6 months ago. And, we were very open about it to the rest of the staff, like, this is why he had to leave. So all of those things are just sort of setting the culture that we want.